Imagine this. A manga appeared quietly in Japan in 1999, no marketing campaign. No famous artist behind it, no vibrant ink or eye-catching visuals. Just pencil sketches rough, almost like the journal of a high school student recreating a series of strange dreams. The author signed the name Tatsuki, a name no one knew, no one could verify, and then ... she vanished, as if she had never existed. Now you see, I'm an archaeologist. I believe in traces. I believe that everything that happens leaves a clue, whether buried deep beneath ancient soil or hidden within the mind of a single human being. But what Tatsuki left behind wasn't a relic, it was something more elusive, a sequence of dreams. Strangely, many of those dreams came true. In 2011, when a tsunami devastated northeastern Japan, killing and displacing over 15,000 people, a young person in an online community happened to flip through that old manga. And what they discovered sent chills down my spine and through the nation. One of Tatsuki's dreams had depicted the disaster's aftermath with eerie precision, violent waves, flooded streets, and a strange number, 311, quietly written on the cover. 12 years before it happened, I visited ancient lands where myth and reality blend together. I've stood in limestone caves in Central America, where the Maya carved prophecies of the end times into the stone. But I've never seen a personal dream act as a blueprint of future catastrophe until Tatsuki. And then, after more than 2 decades of silence, in 2023, Tatsuki reappeared. Not to seek fame, not to cash in on media attention, but to warn. She republished the book, this time with complete annotations, dates, personal reflections, and one haunting detail. A final dream, one that hasn't happened yet. A dream dated 5 a.m., July 5th, 2025. Have you ever had that feeling? Dreaming something so vivid, only to see it unfold in real life years later? A fan once wrote to me that he had a dream of a plane crash, and a week later, a real crash made headlines. He wasn't a prophet, just someone who, in a fleeting moment, might have connected with a deeper current of time. I'm not saying Tatsuki's the only one. Throughout history, many ancient cultures, from Egypt to Atlantis, to the Polynesians, spoke of those who could dream the future. Prophets who lived in isolation, sometimes worshipped, sometimes rejected. But one thing they had in common: they never dreamt of beautiful things. Their visions were warnings. What haunts me most isn't whether the dream is true or false. It's why someone would carry such horrifying images for decades, and why she chose to return now, in an era shaken by pandemic, war, and climate crisis. Could it be that Tatsuki is more than a dreamer, but a scribe of the future, a witness to something that transcends logic and modern science? Of course, some will say it's just coincidence. But if you stand in the Tokyo Museum of History, look at the photo of the 1995 Kobe earthquake, and then look at Tatsuki's sketch, you'll understand why researchers across Japan sat down in disbelief. Those drawings are no longer art. They're forgotten messages from the future. I don't know what will happen on July 5th, 2025, but if you're watching this video, I want you to remember one simple thing. If there's even a 1% chance that dream is real, wouldn't you want to be the one who listened and prepared? I want you to close your eyes for a moment. Imagine yourself standing in the middle of a still ocean, somewhere south of Japan. No sound of waves, no birds in the sky. The water's surface is as calm as a mirror. Then suddenly, the sea begins to boil. Massive air bubbles rise from the ocean floor, as if something beneath is beginning to stir. In Tatsuki's dream, there were 2 gigantic dragons, but not dragons from fairy tales. These were dark, serpentine entities, hundreds of meters long, twisting silently in the deep, deep water. No roaring, no thrashing. They simply circled one point, silently, as if guarding a secret that's been buried for 1,000 years. When I looked at her sketch as an explorer, I couldn't help but think of the 2 massive tectonic plates beneath that region, the Philippine Sea Plate and the Pacific Plate. Those are the real dragons, moving mere centimeters per year, but capable of triggering earthquakes so devastating they feel like the wrath of gods. And you know what? Tatsuki didn't just see destruction. In that dream the massive column of seawater erupted into the sky. After the tsunami swallowed the coast, a new landmass rose from the ocean floor. Wet soil, jagged rock, ground that no human had ever walked on. And on that land, she saw a strange unification. Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and the Philippines. Connected as one, as if reborn from chaos. As a historian, I couldn't ignore that detail, because in many ancient Asian legends, there's a recurring myth. The continent of Mu, or Lemuria, a lost land that once existed in the Pacific, connecting island civilizations in a forgotten past. Perhaps it's just metaphor, or maybe it's humanity's unconscious yearning to return to a time before borders. Before we were divided, I have to ask, was that dream real? Or was it a symbol of something deeper, a continent of the mind? Tatsuki never gave answers. She never claimed to be right. Even in the 2023 reprint of her book, she left a quiet footnote beneath that same dream. I'm not sure this dream was about the 2011 tsunami, because I was wearing short sleeves, and that March was winter. That detail chilled me, because if the dream wasn't about 2011, then which year was it? And then it struck me. July 5th, 2025. Midsummer. It fits. Like a row of dominoes just waiting to fall. A fan once emailed me and wrote, "I don't believe in prophecy, but I believe in intuition." When I read Tatsuki's dream, I didn't feel fear, I just felt something is coming. I understand that, because true fear doesn't come from death, but from not knowing if we'll understand what's happening when it finally happens. I'm not asking you to believe in Tatsuki. I'm not here to spread fear. I'm simply telling a story. A story that, with time, may no longer be just a story. Now imagine this. If one day you see the sea beginning to boil, just like Tatsuki described, what will you think? Coincidence? Or a reminder that may have echoed? From the distant past. Have you ever felt this? A moment unfolds before your eyes, so vividly real, cloaked in an inexplicable mist. Like meeting a stranger and feeling as though you've known them from a past life. I once had such an experience in Nazca, Peru, the land of ancient lines that stretch for dozens of kilometers, forming shapes only visible from the sky. No one knows why the ancients created images they themselves could not see. And that S, when I realized, some things aren't meant to be explained. They meant to be felt. Tatsuki, that name, isn't the only one in history who has seen the future, but she is one of the very few who didn't turn that ability into a weapon or a tool for profit. No TV appearances, to conferences. No best-selling books with flashy signatures. She simply left behind drawings and then faded into silence. That's what makes me, as a historian, wonder if she might not be an individual at all. Let me share a hypothesis once whispered to me by a Japanese scholar. Tatsuki is not one person. She is a group, or an organization assigned to record dream memories, like the keepers of the world's collective memory. Sounds insane, doesn't it? But if you've spent long enough in archaeology, you begin to see. The world does not operate on a linear logic as we believe. What would you say if I told you that in East Asian history, there were entire classes of monks called Yamabushi who lived in isolation on mountain peaks for decades, just to pass down the visions they saw in meditation? They didn't call it prophecy. They called it future memory. I once met a man in Kyushu, living in a tiny temple hidden behind a bamboo forest. No phone, no internet. But he had sketches of the Fukushima disaster drawn before 2011. When I asked him how, he just smiled. I don't see the future, just recall things. From a different time in the world sounds crazy. Maybe. But the most insane part is how modern society reacts. When Tatsuki republished her book in 2023, a flood of fake accounts appeared. People fighting to claim, "I'm the real author, I inherited the dreams, I'm the modern prophet." Social media became a battlefield of disinformation, conspiracy theories, and failed attempts at verification. And through all the noise, the real Tatsuki remained silent. I remember a quiet conversation with a geologist at the University of Tokyo. He said something I can never forget. Maybe Tatsuki isn't trying to predict anything. Maybe she's just transmitting a message from somewhere we don't yet understand. And then he added, science doesn't reject dreams. It just hasn't yet found the language to describe them. Maybe you're thinking, this is a beautiful story, but is it real? I can't answer that for you. I can only ask, in a world full of fake news, fabrications, and propaganda, what truly is real? A dream written in 1999 that predicted the death of Princess Diana, the Kobe earthquake, and the 2011 tsunami. Or a single-line warning about July 5, 2025, accompanied by this message. If even a small part of you believes, the loss might be lessened. Let me know if you'd like a voiceover script version or to adjust the tone for a documentary. After a great deluge, the sea lay calm as if it had never known a wave. Then from the depths of the ocean, once thought long forgotten, a land slowly emerged. No flag, no map, no allegiance to any empire. Just land. Raw, ancient, and primordial. A new continent. Or perhaps a very, very old one. In Tatsuki's final dream, she saw a land rising from the sea, connecting Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and the Philippines.
Oh.
It wasn't merely a geological phenomenon. It was a symbol, a whisper from forgotten legends. I still remember the first time I heard the name Mu, a civilization said to have once existed in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, radiant and more advanced than even Atlantis. According to the controversial archaeologist James Churchward, Mu was the true cradle of humanity, existing tens of thousands of years before sinking into the deep sea. And then there's Lemuria, which appeared in 19th century geological theories as a scientific hypothesis to explain the strange distribution of lemurs across India and Madagascar. Over time, it evolved into a spiritual legend, a dwelling place of awakened beings from an ancient dream realm. Have you ever heard such legends? Or perhaps you've ever wondered? Why do we always feel as though something is hidden beneath the ocean's surface? A fan once wrote to me, I've never believed in Mu or Lemuria, but every time I stand before the ocean, it feels as if millions of memories are trying to rise up, as if the water is holding something that humanity isn't ready to receive. I can't explain that feeling with science, but I've stood on Yonaguni Island where submerged rock formations resemble sunken temples, and in that moment, I had no more doubts. Beneath our feet may lie an erased chapter of human history. So when Tatsuki dreamt of a giant continent, was it really just a dream? Or was it a memory from an ancient epoch repeating itself under the guise of symbolism? When she saw a continent rising, perhaps it wasn't just a geological event, but a metaphor for the reawakening of humanity's collective memory, a message that we were once connected and we will reconnect through stone and through the spiritual tremors of our souls. A native anthropologist in Polynesia once told me, every island is a mountaintop left behind by a sunken continent. Those who don't know, call it a myth. Those who do simply smile because they still hear its call every time the waves crash against the shore. Do you hear it? This is incredible. A Japanese artist named Tatsuki has been getting a lot of attention for this drawing. At first glance, it looks like a pretty typical piece of art. But it's actually an incredible example of how the human body can sense things, like earthquakes and volcanic eruptions before they happen. You see, Tatsuki was floating in the air south of Japan. She was looking down at the ocean, and in her dream, she saw two colossal beings stirring beneath the water. Now, when she drew them, she had no idea that this would align so perfectly with the tectonic map of the area. Those two dark shapes are the Philippine Plate and the Pacific Plate. And as you can see, they're moving in exactly the same direction. For thousands of years, people have been telling stories about animals that can sense earthquakes. Dogs howling at night, birds flying away from forests, fish leaping from the sea. These stories are all based on real events, but we've somehow lost that ability. As cities have gotten bigger and noisier, it's become harder to hear the subtle frequencies of the earth. But maybe, just maybe, Tatsuki is one of the last people who can still hear it. Tatsuki dreamed of two dragons sleeping beneath the ocean. And one day I stood atop an extinct volcano in Tonga, looking down at the sea. And I listened to fishermen tell stories of two sleeping dragons beneath the ocean. They didn't know the words tectonic plate or subduction zone, but they knew that place was not normal. They said if the dragons wake, the sea will no longer be the sea. Have you ever felt it? That faint ringing in your ears near the ocean? That inexplicable unease in still nature? A fan once emailed me, I don't believe in dreams. But once I dreamt the sea was boiling. 2 months later, I saw the news about an underwater eruption near the Ogasawara Islands. I can't verify his dream, but I can verify this. Science and mysticism aren't always in conflict. Sometimes they're just two ways of expressing the same truth. Tatsuki saw two dragons beneath the sea. But perhaps she wasn't the only one who ever did. She was simply the one brave enough to record it. And you, if you looked down at the water today and found it too quiet, what would you think? Have you ever noticed that some things don't repeat, yet always return? Like a sudden May rain, or a dream you have every few years? Or how sometimes you'll feel a vague sense of familiarity with a place or a person, but you can't quite put your finger on it. Tatsuki, the woman who drew prophetic dreams, didn't just dream and recount. She dreamed in cycles. An event in her dream would occur exactly 5, 10, or 15 years later, again and again with a precision that was almost eerie. Freddie Mercury passed away in 1991, exactly 15 years after her first dream about him. Princess Diana died in 1997, exactly 5 years after a dream that featured the word Dana. The Kobe earthquake struck exactly 15 days after she drew a scene of cracked earth and choking dust. I once tried to analyze these numbers through a scientific lens, but then I began to realize these numbers weren't random. They aligned with ancient cycles used in Eastern civilizations, particularly in Chinese lunar calendars. The 5-year elemental cycle corresponds to the balance of qi, the vital energy. The 15-year major cycle marks key transitions in the heavenly stem and earthly branch system. And on the other side of the world, the Maya also divided time into smaller cycles of 5, 10, 20 years, interlocking like a great time wheel. It's not a straight timeline. Tatsuki wasn't predicting the future. She was simply moving with the cycle. It's like something most of us have forgotten because we live too linearly, too modernly, and far too hurriedly. I once stood inside the pyramid in Mexico. And a local researcher said to me, the ancients didn't count time by minutes and hours. They felt it, like seasons, like ocean waves. And those who listen deeply enough know when a cycle is about to return. Perhaps Tatsuki heard it, or more accurately felt it. A fan once shared with me that she often had strange dreams. And they always occurred in years ending in 0 or 5. She didn't know why. But every 5 years, something seemed to come back. Sounds superstitious? Maybe, but the essence of a cycle isn't prediction, it's returning. Time, after all, doesn't flow like a straight river, it moves like a spiral. You think you're moving forward, but you're really circling back to a deeper layer of the same loop? And perhaps the frightening part isn't how accurate Tatsuki's dreams were? It's the question, are we living inside a much bigger cycle and have never noticed it? If 2011 was the tremor of a tsunami, then 2025 is the next mark on that 15-year spiral. So I'm not asking, do you believe? I'm asking, are you listening to the cycles returning in your own life? You ever have a dream that seems so real? You wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, filled with unease. You think it was just a dream, but then the years go by and each of those things slowly starts to come true. That's what happened to Tatsuki. In 1976, she dreamed of Freddie Mercury collapsing on stage beneath the lights, the crowd going silent. At the time, no one could imagine a day when he would be gone. But 15 years later, on November 24, 1991, Freddie Mercury passed away. And in a documentary film about his life, they recreated a scene from Tatsuki's dream journal. Then in 1992, she dreamed of a long hallway. White light shining through a window, and a painting of a blonde woman holding a child. The word Dana appeared, and then the sound of crashing metal, people screaming, and a terrifying silence. 5 years later, Princess Diana died in a car crash in Paris, and the image of Dana, a way of writing Diana in Japanese phonetics, suddenly became a chilling omen that no one wanted to acknowledge. Another time, on January 2, 1995, Tatsuki dreamed of the ground splitting open, dust rising into the air, and an oppressive atmosphere. Yes, as if something were about to explode. That morning, she wrote a short note. Something will break in 15 days. And exactly 15 days later, on January 17th, the Kobe earthquake struck. More than 6,400 lives were lost. The city was left in ruins. The scenes from her dream drawings appeared on national television. At that point, people began to pay attention. But it wasn't until the 2011 tsunami that her story truly resurfaced. Tatsuki had drawn rising ocean waters engulfing the streets. On the cover of her comic, she placed the number 311, matching the date March 11, 2011. The day of the Tohoku triple disaster. That dream image had been drawn back in 1999. No one believed her. No one paid attention, till it was too late. For over 20 years, she never made a public appearance, never spoke, never accepted any honors. And yet what she drew with simple pencil strokes and clumsy captions shook the entire nation of Japan and left millions asking, who was she really? There's a theory I once heard from an old scholar in Kyoto, an expert in ancient spiritual traditions. He said Tatsuki wasn't a prophet. She was a Yamabushi, just in modern form. I paused and asked him, Yamabushi, you mean the mountain hermits? The wandering ascetics? He nodded slowly, as if revealing an ancient secret. In traditional Japanese belief, the Yamabushi are practitioners of Shugen-do, a syncretic spiritual path that blends Buddhism, Taoism, and native folk spirituality. They live in deep mountains detached from temples or shrines. They train their bodies and minds through meditation, austerity, mountain ascents, and connection with the spiritual forces of nature. And what's most remarkable, many of them are believed to receive visions, images, sounds, messages from other dimensions, or even from the future. Have you ever heard of the shaman of Mongolia, the dreamwalkers of North American tribes, the prophetic dreamers in ancient Amazonian cultures? In Japan, the Yamabushi are their equivalent, people who can still hear what the rest of us have become too noisy to notice. And Tatsuki, I believe, may have been one of them, just wrapped in modern skin. Have you noticed Tatsuki never appeared on television? She never live-streamed. She never published explanations for what she saw. She only emerged when necessary to deliver an important message, and then she vanished again. Just like the ancient Yamabushi, holy men who only came down the mountain when the mountain had a signal to send, when the river changed color, when a dream returned. A fan once shared with me, one night I dreamed I was walking through a bamboo forest. An old man with silver hair sat meditating in the path. He said nothing, just looked at me and smiled. I didn't understand until I read about Tatsuki. I'm not saying all of this is true. I only know that throughout human history there have always been people who chose to listen to nature more than to other people. And they are often misunderstood until the moment what they warned us about actually happens. So the question is, if Tatsuki truly was a kind of modern Yamabushi, living quietly, recording her dreams and connecting with the rhythm of the planet, then is there still room for such people in today's world? Or have we become too loud, too rushed, that even the final warnings are lost in the storm of information? Perhaps Tatsuki never meant to scare us. She was merely fulfilling the role that has existed in every culture, the one who stands between the seen world and the unseen world. Not called a prophet, just someone who still carries the rare gift of hearing the voices of the mountains, the sea, and the future. And if that's true, she is not a hermit. She is the last mirror we may have left to see what we've forgotten. You're dreaming, but it's not a vague or fragmented dream. Everything is alarmingly clear: the sounds, the colors, the faces, the numbers on a clock. Even the smell of smoke, the salty taste of seawater in the air. Then you wake up, and the dream is still there. It doesn't fade, it doesn't vanish, it doesn't blur with time like ordinary dreams. It stays with you, like a memory that never happened. That's what happened to Tatsuki Ond. The strangest part is, after each disaster, those dreams became even clearer. At first, they were faint images: a wave, a hallway, a strange name. But after the Kobe earthquake in 1995, she began dreaming in more detailed scenes. After the 2011 tsunami, the dreams were no longer just visuals. They became motion, events, sound, and a paralyzing fear that seized her entire body. As if someone or something was transmitting signals into her mind. And every time humanity suffered a shock strong enough, that signal channel opened a little wider. I know it sounds crazy. But in archaeology, I've encountered many ancient legends about dreamers after disaster, those whose visions became the voice of collective memory. In a tribe in the Altai Mountains, there's a tale of the one who hears the earth crack. In Guatemala, descendants of the Maya speak of a girl who dreamed of fire falling from the sky just before Pacaya volcano erupted. Could it be that something in nature is responding to the pain of the world and seeking to communicate through those who still know how to listen in dreams? A fan once wrote to me, "I never believed in prophetic dreams. But after surviving the 2004 flood in Indonesia, I started having dreams of deep swirling circles in the ocean. Over time, I felt they didn't come from me, from outside. Have you ever felt something like that? A dream you couldn't explain? It carried a fear that didn't seem to belong solely to you? A sense that some invisible hand was inserting images into your sleep, and you were simply the receiver? If so, maybe you've touched the same frequency, the frequency that Tatsuki became the primary channel for. Modern science still doesn't understand what dreams really are. Some say they're just the brain processing data. But in many ancient cultures, dreams are the gateway of the solar transmission line between the present and possible futures. And maybe Tatsuki was a kind of living antenna. She didn't imagine future events. She was simply recording what was approaching, like a camera rolling in the subconscious. But the most frightening part isn't that she foresaw disasters. It's that every time her visions grew clearer, the world had already suffered deeper wounds. You might ask, then why didn't anyone stop to listen to her sooner? I've asked myself that many times too. Maybe it's because we only trust what's loud. And dreams, especially warning dreams, always speak in a very quiet voice. And that voice only becomes clear when it's too late. Tatsuki was right. If there truly is some force sending her images through dreams, then the biggest question is no longer, what's about to happen? But rather, have we become quiet enough to hear? On a night in early 1995, a woman named Tatsuki awoke from a strange dream. In that dream, she saw the ground splitting open into deep cracks, the sky covered in a thick haze of dust and rock, and the smell of ash heavy and sharp lingering in her nose. When she woke up, she didn't scream. She wasn't panicked. Instead, she quietly opened her notebook and wrote down the date, January 2nd. Then she sketched the scene and added a single caption, "Something will break." Within 15 days, and exactly 15 days later, at 5:46 a.m., on January 17, 1995, the most devastating earthquake in modern Japanese history struck Kobe. 6,434 people died. More than 300,000 were left homeless. Streets shattered, bridges collapsed, train stations crumbled, and the entire infrastructure buckled, as if the earth itself was trying to send a message as the news spread. A small group of Japanese scholars previously involved in researching psychic phenomena were forced to speak out, not to confirm, but to admit that they couldn't disprove her. A veteran seismologist said during a conference, "I don't believe in prophecy, but I believe in probability, and the probability that someone could depict the scale of a disaster and get the timing right 15 days in advance is something we can't ignore." Have you ever felt like something inside you was trying to tell you something? It's not with words, but with instinct, a subtle vibration, a low-frequency signal that most of us have forgotten how to hear. I once met a survivor of the 2010 Haiti earthquake. He told me that a few days before the quake, the stray dogs in his village ran off. The birds stopped returning to their usual rooftops. And his grandmother, woman with little formal education, simply said, "The earth is about to take a deep breath. I can't prove that. But I do know there are signals thin, quiet, and fragile that only a few people in the world can still perceive." And Tatsuki perhaps was one of those rare few who retained that ability. You know what's remarkable? She didn't boast about her dreams. She didn't post them on Facebook. She didn't go on television. She simply drew them, tucked them into her notebook, and stayed silent. And it was that silence that forced scientists to pay attention. Because those who seek the spotlight are often forgotten. A quiet precision always leaves people uneasy. So if the dream was real, if those 15 days were nature's warning gifted to someone, what can we do? Maybe not everyone is meant to see the future. But everyone needs to learn to be silent. Long. Enough to hear the earth breathing. One early morning, you open your eyes and see that the world map is no longer the same. In the vast ocean south of Japan where, once there were only waves and mista, new strip of land has risen. Vast, rugged, muddy, and with almost no trace of human presence. It connects Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and the Philippines into one continuous landmass. A young continent emerging from what was once thought to be stillness. Sounds like science fiction, doesn't it?
Act.
But this is something geologists do not rule out. They've warned for years. If the two massive tectonic plates, the Pacific Plate and the Philippine Sea Plate, collide with enough force beneath the ocean floor, an undersea mountain range could be thrust above the water's surface. I once had the chance to interview Professor Cato, an expert in Pacific stratigraphy. He told me something I've never forgotten. The Earth changes shape every day. The only problem is, we change too slowly to notice. He explained that there are deep sea tremors no one feels, but they're quietly building pressure, like a sleeping giant breathing steadily, waiting for the moment to awaken. I know that when people hear a new continent rising, many will immediately think of the legends of Lemuria or Mutha's so-called lost civilizations. But what if we reverse the question? What if these legendary continents aren't something that once existed, but something that will exist? What if the memory of a forgotten land is actually a memory from the future, transmitted backwards through dreams, intuition, and the subconscious minds of a few highly sensitive people like Tatsuki? A fan once messaged me. I dreamt of a place I'd never seen on any map, but in the dream, I knew exactly where it was. Have you ever dreamed of a place you've never been, but deep inside, felt like you had lived there before? If so, ask yourself, maybe that dream wasn't a memory from the past, but a map from the future sent quietly by your own mind. Beneath the Pacific Ocean, tectonic plates are building pressure. They don't need humans to believe. They only need time. They've done it before. In 2013, Nishinoshima Island rose from an undersea eruption. In 2021, near the Kuril Islands, a new landmass appeared within days of a deep-sea quake. No warning or forecast, no science fiction, just truth and a news article posted after it happened. I'm not saying a new continent will rise tomorrow, but I believe this. The Earth has never been still. It is a living being. It breathes, it transforms, and sometimes it remembers. If Tatsuki saw a new land rising from the ocean, and that dream kept returning over the years, then maybe she wasn't seeing a vision, but a truth that's drawing near. So the final question for you is, if a new continent truly formed in your lifetime, would you be the one standing at a distance watching? Or would you be the first to step onto it, to write the story of a world that never existed before? One early morning in the near future, the map of Asia changes. A new stretch of land, rugged, still soaked in saltwater, rises from the ocean floor. It doesn't divide regions, but instead connects Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and the Philippines into a unified whole. Sounds like a sci-fi dream, doesn't it? But in truth, it was once an ancient memory. Archaeologists call it the Austronesian Maritime Network, an ancient system of trade, migration, and culture that once linked the scattered islands stretching from Taiwan to the far South Pacific. Over 4,000 years ago, the Austronesian people had already mastered the art of long-distance sea voyaging. No compass, no map. Only their eyes, the stars, migratory birds, and the color of the sea. They were the people who sailed with the wind, connecting islands into an ecosystem of shared heritage. Have you ever wondered why Tagalog in the Philippines, Mbori in New Zealand, and many indigenous languages in Taiwan share the same grammatical roots? The answer lies beneath the waves. We were once one, but the ocean separated us. I once visited the ancient Ivatan village in Batan's between Taiwan and Luzon. An old woman told me, "Our ancestors swam here from the north, riding wooden boats guided by the moonlight." I asked her, "Where did they come from?" She pointed to the sea toward Japan. When I shared this story during an academic roundtable in Tokyo, an anthropology professor exclaimed, "Then maybe Tatsuki didn't see a new future. She saw a future that restores a lost past." If one day a new continent truly emerges from the sea, Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, the Philippines are geologically joined, then perhaps the ancient vision of the Austronesian network will live again. Not through culture, but through terrain. A fan once messaged me, "I dreamed I was walking on a strange land. There were no national flags, no dominant language, but I could understand everyone. And they called the place the Island of Harmony." I don't know whether that dream was real or metaphorical, but I believe if a civilization once thrived on interconnection, then the name Harmony has never felt more fitting than now. Geologists say that, with the intense activity of the Philippine Sea Plate and the Pacific Plate, the rise of a large landmass in the future is not impossible. And if that land rises just as Tatsuki dreamed, at the very spot that once connected regions within the Austronesian network, then perhaps. This is nature's way of reawakening heritage by reshaping geography. I'm not saying the Earth has memory, but sometimes nature knows how to restore what was once torn apart, not through language, not through ideology, but by reconnecting the pieces of its own body that were once fractured. I want you to think about this. If one day you stood upon that new land, where deep sea once was, now solid earth beneath your feet, what would you name it? Would you call it a new territory, or dot the memory of a continent that once lived?